Shruti, if you could please record this session.
Yeah, I've started the recording.
Thank you. A very good morning to one and all present here. It is indeed a pleasure, and we are thrilled to have Professor Dr. Hari Joshi here with us as a guest speaker for this very first webinar of the digital future. Professor Hari Joshi is a PhD from Production and Quantitative Methods area of IIM Ahmedabad. His dissertation broadly falls in the areas of supply chain coordination, where he examines the coordination mechanisms like matching and dynamic pricing in the ride-hailing platforms using a multi-agent network-based model. His prior research experience has been in the areas of revenue network-based model. His prior research has been in the areas of dynamic pricing, design of automated storage systems for e-commerce. Before joining IIM Ahmedabad, he worked in the automotive industry with Ashok Leyland and Daimler in the production, procurement, and logistics and program management function. His current research interests lie in the area of supply chain coordination, agent-based simulation and modeling, sharing economy, multi-sided platforms, and urban mobility. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome Professor Joshi here. So, as we all are eagerly waiting to hear Sir's view on digital transformation of businesses and how it is shaping the society at large, I now invite Professor Joshi to deliver his lecture. Sir, please.
All right. Thank you, Harsh, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for joining for this lecture on a weekend. Right. I would try ensuring that this is not your conventional JGU lecture. Right. We'll try making it more interactive. It should not be. I take it as a dialogue between you and me about how businesses are becoming digital. Right. In this area specifically, when we talk about modern businesses and how their digitalization is happening, there are a lot of places where you young folks are more updated than us, right? So while I've taken similar courses in JGU, a lot of times I have been informed by students about new games and stuff, right? So uh, yeah, so I'm looking forward to hearing your anecdotes, right? And I see there is a lot of participation from other schools beyond JGBS, right? So there are a lot of people from law school, in international affairs, right? So public policy, they are very interesting perspective around these technologies, and I'm very happy that we can discuss on certain those slides. Am I audible? Is it fine? Audio fine?
Yes, sir, you're perfectly audible.
All right. Okay. So, like what academicians do, I prepared a PPT which could act as my aid. And what I'll do is I'll just take sound access also for my computer, so that if there are small videos which I would like to show, I can talk about them. Right. So, okay. So the digital future, right? That's what I was asked to talk about, and we'll look into how we've got into this place, right? So before we talk about future, let's understand the past first, right? So technologies have always shaped the world, right? It's not the first time. Right now we talk about that there's so new kind of businesses emerging, but this is not for the first time it is happening, right? That has happened historically also. What I wanted was to make you people appreciate. Some of you would already be aware about this. How, in a way, if you look at the socio-political landscape of the earth, how that has been shaped with a changing technology paradigm, right? So this guy, Thomas Friedman, he in a way suggested that we can in a way classify globalization into three phases, right? So globalization 1.0, which was from 1492 to roughly around 1800. In this era, there was expansion which happened with muscle power, horsepower, because some automation, some steam power, we were making steam engine, the idea of engine came, and we could move faster, right? We could have more power, right? Horsepower is a unit for measuring energy and power, right? So we could move faster, and that led to change in the world, right? There was a rise of imperialism. Is anyone aware what imperialism is all about? I think a lot of you would be knowing that better than me. this this is sounding like a class CP. Uh, so uh, so imperialism was this quest which happened centered around Western Europe, where these countries spread to all remaining countries of the world, right? What are the languages which are spoken in South America? If anyone can help me with that, you can type it out. You know what? Spanish, yes, you're right, Ashutosh. There's one more language.
Portuguese.
Portuguese, yes, yes. So if you look at that entire continent, right? So there are two languages which are spoken there: Portuguese and Spanish, majorly. There can be other languages as well, but to my understanding, most of South America speaks Spanish, and your Brazil speaks Portuguese, right? So there were these two countries, this from Iberian Peninsula in Europe. There were a lot of migration which happened, right? Imperialists, they traveled, they developed ships, they developed modern ships, and they traveled on initially, the quests were initially scientific, right? There were likes of Magellan. There was this fellow who wanted to prove that Earth is round. He wanted to traverse a circle around the Earth, right? And so initially the quest was scientific, like it always is. Then it became political, right? So these countries went to different continents for trade, and they settled there, right? We had our share of colonization which happened after that, right? So that was what happened in the world while this first phase of globalization occurred. And it, in a way, the key driver for that was the technological advancement which was happening. Mechanization in some sense was happening for the first time, right? So the key difference which came in how the world is shaped is, from small kingdoms you move to big nations, right? So as a king could communicate to a larger audience, it became a complete nation, bigger nation, right? While we talk about that, historically India was these kingdoms were combined at different points in history. But if you look at the world in general, one trend which was seen was small kingdoms combined to form bigger nations, right? That was a key takeaway of the globalization 1.0, right? And this happened with technological advancement at the backdrop driving these changes, right? The second phase of globalization, Friedman points out, is somewhere between 1800 to 2000, right? In this phase, uh, your transportation costs were coming down, as more railroads were built, steam engine became very common, and in the latter part of it, you had something called telecommunication which came in, right? Yeah, now you could talk to people virtually, right? There was something called telephony. Initially, it started with telegraphs, and then telephony came in, right? You could speak to somebody who's distant from you, right? Information, which is at the core of it, right? Information transfer could happen fast, right? Now you could communicate to distant lands fast, right? Earlier, how kings would communicate, communication was very top driven back then. There will be horse riders will be sent from destination A to A1. From A1 to A2, you'll have another fellow. From A2 to A3, you'll have another fellow, and that's how communication happened, right? And now you could communicate faster, right? And because of that, what we saw eventually was the rise of a multinational company. Right now, it is very intuitive, very obvious to us that if I'm a successful company, I'll be doing businesses in multiple countries, preferably, right? But it's not such an obvious thing. There was no idea of companies as such initially. Then a few trading companies like East India Company and all came up. Companies producing products becoming huge was not possible because there was no mass production. Production never happened in factories before 1900s, and you could not communicate fast, right? And since you could not communicate fast, you could not source from different parts, right? So if I have to make something mechanical, my factory would be located very close to where iron ore is. But now with railroads coming in, with steam engine becoming very commonly available, you could have your source situated somewhere thousands of miles, hundreds of miles away at least, and you can have production, right? And there in globalization 2.0, we had a rise of multinational companies, right? So now what Friedman says that we are in the third wave of globalization from 2000 onwards, and he mentions tint flatteners. So he's a famous book which says that the world is getting flattened now, right? By flattened, it means that we are becoming more connected from very heavy hierarchical centralization. We are moving to a little decentralized setup, right? That's what uh, Friedman points out, right? But you're getting my point. So what I'm trying to establish is that technological change, paradigm change in technology alters the geopolitical configuration of world, right? This happened in the first wave of globalization, which started in 1400, 1500, and we saw the rise of a nation state back then. In the second wave of globalization, which started around 1800s to 2000, we are saying 2000 because then we point out as a start point of something new, which we call as information age, right? From 1800 to 2000, we see the next phase of globalization, and in this phase of globalization, you had rise of multinational company, right? So that is the second thing which happened. Now we are in the third age, the phase which we are calling as globalization 3.0. In this phase, something new is happening. Any idea what that new is? Any random guess what you can think of? There can be a lot of answers to it. We have not yet passed this phase to write concretely the history of this phase 3. But what all changes do you see? I say rise of nation state with globalization. Phase 1, rise of multinational firm. With phase 2, right? Cybercrime, terrorism, yes, terrorism is on a rise. I think terrorism in some form existed earlier also. The way it happens has changed, right? So a lot of things, as Prathamesh is rightly pointing out, has moved to the virtual world, right? Cryptocurrency, yes, that is one change which is happening, right? So if you have to generalize it, right? If you have to look at changes at the broader level, I can say a lot of things are moving virtual, right? We are living in an information age where from physical products, we are moving to digital products. If you see it in terms of businesses, if you want to understand this change, uh, what businesses these days are doing, what the biggest firms of today are doing is that they are not making any product or service, right? They are just being the middlemen, right? They are providing you a value which we are calling as coordination, and that they are able to do because of the faster networks, right? Can you anyone point out to new companies which you think are really big? So can you think of any name of the firm? You can type it out. Let's look at what they do, essentially do, right? Big companies which are not older than, let's say, 2000. Apple, Microsoft, yes. I think both Apple and Microsoft are old. Cred, Zomato, yes. Two good examples we have. Others, Facebook, yes. Post 2000. Any other name? Anyone? Google, yes. Google is also a little older than 2000. It's a little older than that. Coupang, I have not heard name of this firm. My, I'm unaware. I should look into it. Amazon. Amazon probably is also a firm which started late. Ola, yes, that's a good example again. Alibaba, yes. So now we have some interesting example, right? If you look at these examples, all these examples have one thing in common. A lot of these firms, they are not producing any product. They are not producing any service. They are essentially connecting the two sides of the market, right? So if you look at Ola, for instance, right, there are drivers on one side, there are riders on another side. Ola is a platform which connects these two sides. These companies work on some model which is called an asset light model. Now Ola has started coming into making electric two-wheelers. That's a diversification which they have done. But their core business is providing rides where they are not procuring a fleet of vehicles, but they are sourcing rides, right? Essentially, they are asking drivers to join their platforms, right? And on the other side, you have customers, and these two people are coming together, right? Anyone of you, like, have you seen anyone coming from smaller towns and spaces? Have you seen some place which is referred to as mandi, sabzi mandi, and all weekly bazaar? There would used to be a physical space where these markets will come up, not every day, like they'll come up some time in between. So in my place, there used to be a ground where all vegetable vendors will come by like twice in a week, right? Some places they'll come in the evening every day, right? Are you aware of such physical spaces in places you come from? Are you familiar with? Yes, Harsh is familiar. Akashuran is familiar, right? So I think some of you would be familiar, or you can think of such markets, right? Essentially, lot of your new business, right? So you have labor mandis, yes, absolutely right, Shruti. There are places where your laborers will come in the morning, right? And people who want them for daily wages, they'll in a way pick them, right? Those contractors will pick those laborers for days work or weeks work sometime, right? So there was this interesting physical spaces, right? There's one very interesting example of a modern physical space is Tulip Market in Amsterdam, right? So it's a very interesting example of what they conduct very interesting markets using auctions. So they are physical spaces where transactions happen, right? Essentially, if you look at all your modern day firms, be it an Amazon, be it a Zomato, right? Be it there are social media company where again you coming together for an interaction. These companies, what all they are doing, they are not producing a product, they are not selling a service. What they are essentially doing, they are creating a marketplace where you can come together, right? Where both sides of market, one side you have seller, one side you have buyer, they can come together and make a transaction, right? They are just facilitating the transaction. So post 2000, as internet has become very easily available, we have seen rise of the modern firm, right? Modern firm are platforms. These are marketplaces where the company is doing the job of a matchmaker. Company is providing coordination between the two sides. You have an urban clap, right? Urban clap doesn't own those people who groom, right, or people who provide you AC service. Those servicemen, service people are not part of urban clap's platform, right? These are independent people, independent workers who form the supply side of urban clap, right? And there are customers on the demand side, and what urban clap does is it provides a platform which matches these two sides, right? So that's been one of the change which is happening, right? So let's look at what Friedman points out are the cause of these changes, right? So what we see 2000 onwards is rise of internet and world wide web. The internet itself as we know it has changed, right? Do you remember accessing internet in its earliest phase? To my understanding, internet used to be a very static kind of an environment where internet became, right? There were a lot of websites where we could see a lot of content, right? There were hyperlinks and we can click and gain information, right? It was very one-sided communication to begin with. With time, what happened? Internet became double-sided, right? Now, as users, we could contribute internet. It started with the rise of blogs, RSS feeds, wiki tech, which led to the rise of Wikipedia, right? So internet became two-sided. Now people could type in user-generated content, and that could flow in the internet, right? That has been taken to the next level by your social media platforms. Now these platforms allow user to contribute, right? You have social media websites are essentially websites which are filled with user-generated content, right? So that's been the third the what to say next step in this growth of internet. Now we'll see going forward a lot of virtual reality, augmented reality based applications getting added to internet. As we move to 5G speeds, faster internet speeds, you'll see new kind of applications which will become possible, right? And internet will become more than what we'll see it now, right? A few days back, Mike Zuckerberg, who's head of Facebook, he said that he's investing big time, Facebook investing big time in a concept called metaverse, right? So you'll have all these spaces where you can live a virtual life with your virtual avatar, right? So that's something happening. So internet in itself is going through a big change right now. There has been a shift towards market economies from centrally planned ones. So this started, I think, a lot before 2000, but now this is happening in a lot of countries around the world. There has been development of workflow software connecting computers. Supply chain, modern supply chains have come in. Right now, we get goods, perishable goods like fruits, vegetables from different parts of the world. Right. In India, it will be very difficult to find Indian variant of fruits, but we will be able to find apples from California, New Zealand, and everywhere else. Right. So we live in a globalized world in that sense. The capability to upload, right, has facilitated content creation, right? While uploading sounds like a very obvious word to us these days, but this was a very big step in the development of internet, right? Once you had this ability to upload coming in, now you can create content yourself, right? So you see content creation is a big industry right now, right? TikTok reels, TikTok and Instagram reels and other stuff where people make videos to get that 30 seconds of fame is a big occupation these days, right? So that ability came in sourcing now, because you're so much, you have so much better connected through computers that you can delegate or contract part of your work to outside companies, right? A lot of India got employment because big companies from outside were able to outsource or insource their work. Informing, we are better informed because we have power of searching things on search engine. Think of a time how difficult the world would have been where we didn't have this ability to type something out and search about it, right? So it's sometimes difficult to imagine that kind of world. Offshoring, a lot of work would be relocated to another country, entire operations. And so one example of offshoring would be some of you would be having Apple phones, right? If you will see at the back of your Apple phone, you will see a line written probably that it was manufactured by Foxconn in China for Apple, right? So Apple is not manufacturing its phones itself. It has hired service of a company, something called contract manufacturing. There's another company called Foxconn, which is making phones for it, right? That's been another change. And technology plays a big role in having that change, right? You would be like, why am I talking about all these things? Because they are in a way taking your word to where it stands now, right? And where it is heading towards in future. Because it was a small thing, but it allowed collaboration to happen the way which was not seen earlier, right? Now you can share your specs and design through a computer to a distance place, and somebody else could manufacture that product for you as if it was their own, right? So that things happen. Now, what Friedman says, he mentions his 10th flattener as something which he calls steroids. He says that there are certain technologies which are further amplifying the changes which are caused by the other 9 flatteners, right? So as per Friedman, these are the 10 themes, 10 things which is in a way is flattening the word, and a word is becoming very different from what it was before 2000, before the information age, right? When internet became prominent. Yes, Harsh?
So since you've mentioned that, we are in the third phase of globalization,
Yes.
so there are various technology companies who are already working on uploading your brain into virtual realities. So it's similar to bypass death, or rather, I should put it as cheating on death. So which phase would you put such a sensitive notion in?
Yeah, so I think so one thing. So if you look at this as a notion, right, making intelligence artificial, this as a notion is not new. It existed in some form in science fiction long back. Right now, also it is distant reality is something which I would say intelligence and consciousness is an area where a lot of people have made a lot of speculative claims, but we have not been able to yet understand consciousness and intelligence fully. I think if we are able to do that, there'll be surely a different phase, right? So that will be a bigger change to what I am trying to mention with this globalization 1.123, right? Because if you in a way able to what to say, this gets into a little philosophical domain in my point of view. If you are able to achieve immortality in some sense, right? Then you are in a way making changes which are beyond, which are, all these things are very pretty small then, right? What we are talking about, because you will be in a way contradicting the idea of God for a lot of people, right? Contradicting our idea, our understanding of universe, I would say, if that happens.
Thank you so much, sir. Please do proceed.
Right. Anyone having any thoughts? I'll appreciate if you have any thoughts. I can stop by. There is no fixed agenda for today, right? We can discuss whatever we feel like. All right. So whenever you want to, in a way, stop me in between, please feel free to do that. One thing which I would like to like you to people to note before we move forward is that if you see, every subsequent span of time has been smaller. So 400 years, closely 300 something years for the first phase, 200 odd years for the second phase, and a lot of people are already pointing out that 220 onwards, because of a lot of disruption which this pandemic has caused, we are moving to something called phase 4 of globalization, right? Where the likes of things Harsh is talking about, there are a lot of disruptive technologies which are coming in, which we'll talk about the latter half of the talk. We are already moving to the next phase, right? So one thing very important to understand right now is that the change of the pace of change is becoming faster as time proceeds, right? Things are making like the changes are happening at a much faster phase. The kind of changes which we saw happening in 200, 300 years are now happening in 50, 10, 20 years, right? So that's a change which is seen. I could not get what is GPT-3, Vishwam. Sorry, can you enlighten me a bit? All right. Globalization phase 3. Wow. See, I always that's why I like some like these talks, right? I get to know so many things from you, right? So yeah, so we are. So you're asking me examples of this phase, right? Kind of companies, right? So we'll talk about this. So there are platform-based models which have come. There is a phenomena called sharing economy which came up. So we talked about how a lot of businesses are not selling products and services. Now you have a lot of what to say. There are a lot of businesses where products are getting converted into services, right? Software as a service, mobility as a service. So we'll talk about all these changes. Yes, Vishwam, you would like to say something?
GPT 3 is like one of these projects under the Open AI, of which
Okay.
Tesla and I think Infosys, they are like backers of this project. So it's essentially natural language process, a natural language processor which produces human-like text, right? So
Yeah.
use cases for this technology is, like writing journal articles and, like being almost indistinguishable from like the kind
Yeah.
of, an actual journalist or an actual
Yeah.
academic can provide, right? So in that case,
Yes.
it's very uncanny. It's still very early technology, but again, it's very disruptive in that sense, right?
Right. Thank you for telling me about that. I didn't knew about this time. Yeah, so there are a lot of things happening in NLP, natural language processing. Similarly, people are as you were talking about, people are able to write what to say, write articles indistinguishable from what people could write, right? So initially, when this machine learning and artificial intelligence started, what the people who started it, what the kind of capabilities initially they were trying to develop were capability to play games, right? So initial intelligent machines would try defeating a human being on a game of chess, on a game of poker, right? That's how it started. But now, recently, there have been a lot of offshoots of intelligence, artificial intelligence, which have gained traction, and natural language processing is one. There are machines which are able to produce piece of music indistinguishable from a music created by a human, right? So there are a lot of boundaries which are getting tested. In image processing also, there are a lot of things happening. So there are a few. These are a few areas where AI is actually getting into the next level, I would say, right? Great. So, all right. So this a small video which I in a way to in a way just demonstrate how we have moved, right? So not exactly talking about the digital future, but how technology landscape, how fast it is changing. I thought I'll show you a small video, right? This video in a way compares how pit stop happened in an F1 1950.
My job is to make college easier because students have a lot on their plates.
Let's start.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
Coming from auto industry, I actually draw a lot of examples from this industry. From a 67 seconds pit stop in 1950, we moved to in 2013 to around 2-second pit stop. Right? We talk about double growth, 200% growth. Right? This is like a reduction of from 63 seconds, a reduction up to 2 seconds. Right? That's more than 30 times reduction. Right? So things have changed. That is the pace at which things have been changing, right? So let's move ahead. Now, what we understand, as you were also giving me examples of intelligence. Internet is behind a lot of changes, modern day changes which are happening, right? Computational capabilities. When you talk about intelligence, the way machine learning works is we sit on a big pile of training data, right? And we train algorithms based on that training data. So that training data can either confirm, right? So if it's a data about, let's say you want to do facial recognition, right? So you will feed your machine data about faces and things which are not faces, right? It can be anything, a cup, a mobile, a mountain is not a face, right? So you will feed your machine these data, and it will make it will understand, it will develop its intelligence based on reading both kinds of data which belong to one of these two categories, face and non-face, right? That's how machine learn. So a lot of technological advancements which we're talking about are happening because of changes in technology around internet, changing in our computational capabilities, right? So let's look at what some of these main changes are. Right, so there's something which we call as Moore's law and the microprocessing power. This law states that we are in a way increasing our computational power every 18 months, right? So the price in a way is reducing to half, right? Processing speeds are becoming double every 18 months, and this has been happening since 1950. So every time this happens, so this is an average obviously, every time this happens, the kind of processes which are possible, that in a way changes. So that is leading to a lot of new kind of technologies becoming possible. Another law is a law of mass digital storage. The amount of information we are storing, digital information we are storing, is doubling every year. And we are being able to do that because the cost of storage is coming down more rapidly, right? So, do you people remember something called a floppy drive? What used to be storage capacity of a floppy drive? Any idea? Something in MB, KB, if I'm not wrong. 32 KB, something like that. Right. So then came a CD where you could store up to 700 MB and stuff like that. Now we deal with when we come to our devices, we deal with hundreds of GBs. A lot of you might be having laptops which have 1 TB space, right? So we have moved to that range. Sorry, am I audible? There was a disconnect at my end, I think.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, sorry. Yes, we have moved to solid state drives, right? So things, so in a way, not only as Vishwan pointed out, a very valid point, apart from it becoming cheaper, the kind of ways in which we do storage has also changed, right? We used to store on magnetic tapes with cassettes, then we used to save on silicon based drives, then we used to have hard disks, right? Now we have solid state drives, right? We don't have moving parts essentially. So your storage, the retrieval from that storage is faster, right? So not only we have moved to more storage, the retrieval, the processing with the storage has become faster as well, right? There's Michal's law and network economies. It says that value of a network grows exponentially as a function of users growing in the network, right? Increasing returns to scale, right? That's a very important, would look trivial in comparison to other 2 points, but it's a very important point. Let me try talking about it a bit. Right? Have you heard this phrase that lot of these modern companies which we talk about, Uber, Ola, or you have this Oyo rooms, right? A lot of times there is one criticization these kind of companies faces, that they are not profitable, right? Have you heard that sometimes people, like for some days back, I think Zomato had an IPO, and it was subscribed real good, but a lot of people were like, it's been in losses. I don't know why people are subscribing, right? So while there are a lot of other things, yes, so yes, Ashutosh, that's true for a lot of startups, and all these startups are mostly tech startups where they are being middlemen, right? Amazon has not, now I think Amazon is profitable in a lot of countries, not all markets uh, it is there. But there's one reason why people still invest on these companies, right? So these tech companies, they expand on a phenomena which is called, there is a strategy which is called grow big fast strategy, right? So there is something called economies of scale, and economies of scale in any other business are kind of linear. In case of these network business, where you are interacting with multiple people on both sides of the network, these marketplaces, the economies of scale essentially increase exponentially. So as you increase your user base, and when I'm saying user base on both sides of the market, your productivity, your profits increase exponentially. These businesses are trying to essentially grow in different cities. So if it's an Uber or an Ola, they want to expand to new cities, incurring losses while doing so that they can grow big fast. Once they grow big fast, the Michal's law suggests that they'll have networked economies of scale, and which will be exponential in nature and not linear, right? So for example, if Uber starts in a city, let's say it enrolls 5 drivers to, or 10 or 15 drivers to Uber's platform, and it has a user base of around 100. Now from these 15-20 drivers, you move to, let's say, 50 drivers and 1,000 people, or 200-300 people. You would think that the profits, the margins, and the business for Uber has grown like twice, right? Because both number of drivers and customers have increased by 2 times or 3 times. But essentially, once they are able to do that, their utilization, their efficiencies are actually become much higher. It does not increase just twofold, it increases fivefold, tenfold, right? So that is what we mean by economies of scale, right? A business, once you know there is a business, more people start subscribing it. So it's like a chicken and egg kind of a situation. You create few drivers, you create few riders, more riders get in, more drivers join, and this keeps on iterating itself, right? So essentially, a lot of these tech businesses see something called impact of network economies. You increase it in exponential rate as a function of number of users on both sides of the network, right? So that is another change. There is declining communication cost and the internet. Now most of the population has a very cheap internet access that is allowing kind of businesses to come up. Standards and network effect. A lot of net standards are rising, and there are technology standards, and they which help you in unleashing the economies of scale, right? One another because of globalization, now world interacts, right? So what happens is there are common standards which get created very fast, right? So for any new technology, let's say blockchain or a Bitcoin, right? There'll be standards on how they have to be created, what has to be followed, which will be adhered by all companies which are into cryptocurrency in general, right? So what happens is in such kind of an environment where there is an industry standard which exists really fast, innovation is in a way gets encouraged, right? So and innovation actually feeds each other, right? Innovation happening in one part could be used in another part, right? So one product example we can think of is mobile phones, right? So there are for mobile phones. One is iOS, where you see more system level innovation. So an Apple phone runs on an iOS, and Apple makes all the innovation for all the products, right? It owns the hardware as well as software, right? The other ecosystem is the Android ecosystem. It's an operating system which is provided by Google, and now there are different component manufacturers which make mobile phones and other things, right? If you see Android kind of an ecosystem, we'll see a lot of component level innovation, right? There'll be one camera manufacturer working on making the camera better, right? There'll be one speaker manufacturer working on making the speaker better, one screen manufacturer trying to make the screen more high definition, right? So what happens, a lot of component level innovations happen because there are a lot of different firms which are contributing to the innovation there, right? So because there are standards, right? Everybody knows that there has to be a 3.5 jack if you want to have an audio input. Now, when it gets replaced with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, there are similar guidelines on how wide Bluetooth operates. What kind of radio frequency communication is being used in NFC, right? So there are common standards for that, and existence of these common standards in a way encourages innovation, right? So that has been a change which has come in information age, right? Those things were not there earlier, right? That there is a reason why some parts of the world use left-hand drive vehicle and a right-hand drive vehicle. Are you people aware that a lot of countries have steering wheel on the left side? We have it on the right side, right? Right. Yes. Because there were no standards, right? So we use kilometer. US will use miles. We'll use kg, liter. They'll use gallon, right? So though they were standards, those not very what to say maintained. Sorry, those standards not maintained with great string. They were not very systematically maintained, I would say. Right now, there are clear standards, mandates which globally most firms follow, and therefore this in a way leads to better innovation. Right. So there have been such changes. All right. So maybe shall I skip this automated warehouse? Right. So let me talk about some changes which are happening in some industries, which are very interesting in my opinion. Right. Largest bookseller right now on earth is a software company. Right. Which one would be this firm? Any idea? Amazon. Yes, you're right, Ashutosh. The largest bookseller is in software company, which is Amazon. Music moves digital, right? Music is an industry which I find technology has played a very interesting role, right? It has changed not only the way in which we consume music, but it has also changed the legal landscape around copyright and stuff, right? A lot of you are students of legal school, so you might know a thing or two more than me, right? But it's very interesting how the way we consume music has changed, right? So while we were growing up, I'm not sure if you folks remember the era where we had these magnetic tape-based cassettes. Anyone remembers that? Do you remember those cassettes, music cassettes? Or you haven't seen them? Too alien for you? All right, you have a recall. So we started with magnetic tape-based cassettes. Then we moved to an era where we had CDs, and that was a big revelation, right? Now you could have 700 MB worth of music on a CD, right? So that would move. In terms of capacity, it was very similar to a cassette, right? Movie coming in one music of one album, music album in one CD or two CD usually. Then the big change which came was the start of a format called MP3 format, right? Now this was a very compressible. This is a format where music file could be compressed beyond what was could be imagined earlier. So now you could have a music entire song on 5-6 MB, right? That was a big change. Now in a cassette you could, or now in a CD you could store with 700 MB you can store so many songs. You could store thousands of songs in a on a CD, right? These CDs started because of the format MP3 which was being used. These CDs started getting called MP3s in themselves, right? But with all these changes happening, and we had, as we were talking about, we had hard disks coming in, computers which used to be 32 GB now started becoming 100 GB, 200 GB, 500 GB devices, right? So you could store so much music digitally now. And I think a lot of us, I'm not sure about you, but I at least consumed a lot of music in a way digitally, right? Stored on my computer. And a lot of my friends during my undergrad time, did that, right? So people had people take pride of the big music collection that they had, and the unfortunate part is that all that was doing copyright infringement, right? The music once music went digital, the way we were consuming music was not legal, because we were copying music from different sources, left, right, and center. You had rise of Napster. You had these funny websites called songs.pk hosted in Pakistan, having a big stash of Indian music. You could download those music very easily. You had a YouTube to MP3 converter. You play a song on YouTube, you could convert any piece of music or any piece of media on YouTube into an MP3. Right, so music became there were a lot of copyright infringement which was happening in that era, and people suffered. Creative content creators suffered. Then came an era where even storage of there's no need to store music, right? You have these subscription based services which have come now. You have Apple Music, you have Spotify, you have Ghana, you have Savan, right? So many apps are there which are essentially music libraries. They provide you access. You take a subscription and you get access to their entire library, and you can you just need to be connected to internet and listen to whatever music you want to, and sometimes you can even download certain music you want to, right? Just the only need is that you should be on that platform to access that particular piece of music, right? One good thing which has happened because of this is our consumption of music has become legal again in some sense, right? So even if you are not paying, even if you have Spotify for free, for instance, right? uh, it is getting monetized. Spotify is able to monetize your presence by showing you ads while you are accessing their app, right? So it is monetized. Therefore, those content creators are getting paid, and therefore you will see a lot of independent content creator creating their music again, right? We see an upsurge of people who, in a way, create content and put it on these kind of subscription services, right? So one is the consumption of music becoming legal again. And also secondly, what is happening is music, like many other products, is changing from a product to a service. Now you don't buy an album, you buy subscription to an app, right? So you buy a subscription to avail a service, not buy a product, right? That is one change which is happening in this globalization 3.0, as we were talking about. Products are getting transformed into services, right? Any thoughts, any queries anyone has? Right, let me talk about other things. A lot of your feature films, thanks to pandemic, even more are releasing on digital platforms. Most of your games are going online. There are a lot of new games, highly rich in visual effects and other things are being launched. Marketing has gone digital from commercials which were made for newspaper and television. Now you have all marketing happening on your social media platforms. Recruitment happens on from websites to job portals. Now it happens on your LinkedIn profiles, right? Over and all, we are moving to an era where softwares are available as a service, right? So I wanted to show you this driving car video, but let me try covering the content which I wanted to cover. So all in all, there's this change which I was talking about, that there is a rise of platforms which is happening. We see new business models which are multi-sided platform. These platforms are firms which are not making a product and service or any service. They are just facilitators, where there are two sides, a buyer side and a seller side, and they are just facilitating a market transaction between these two sides. They are providing a function which we can call as coordination, right? These economies are based on, there are economies of information. Essentially, there is a lot of information being exchanged between two sides, and these platforms are essentially facilitating that exchange of information, right? So while think of it, when you're trying to book an Uber cab, what Uber is able to do, it has integrated map capabilities to its app. Now people have phones which have GPS, so their location is known, and they have internet on their phones, which allows them to send updates about their location using internet, right? What Uber essentially does is, there are customers, their locations are known, there are drivers whose location is known. It in a way it ensures this exchange of information happening seamlessly, right? And then using this information, it matches by itself, right? It matches these different drivers to different customers, and it in a way informs the customer with which driver you have been matched, and it informs the driver, and it also tells the driver that this is the path you need to follow to reach to this customer, right? That is the value which Uber is providing. It's just facilitating the information flow. Whenever we are doing any transaction, right? If I, instead of an Uber, I would have hailed this taxi on a road, I would have to wave my hand, get the attention of the taxi driver, make him or her stop, right? I would have talked to him about my destination, made a bargain, decided the price, would have fixed the price, and then would have traveled, right? Now all these communication for me is being done by Uber. And because of technology, it's ensuring that it is not only talking to the driver which is just next to me, but probably is able to look beyond visible space to find out the best match driver to me, and I don't have to step out on the road to search for that cab, right? So they are just facilitating communication, and therefore they are economies of information. In these new digital businesses, trust plays a big role, right? How do you think trust comes in these setups, these business models, be it an Amazon, a Zomato, an Airbnb, right? How does these businesses have trust? Yes, Harsh?
So I believe these businesses build on trust with what they are able to showcase in the market. If Zomato is in the market, so if the delivery is actually happening and people are downloading their app and they are getting the services which they expect, that is how I believe, trust is built upon, because I rarely hear about Swiggy, and Zomato, of course, has taken more of the market, but I rarely hear about Food Panda. I don't know if many of you might know about Food Panda, but it came in the market, but it couldn't carve a niche for themselves.
All right. All right, getting your point. But if I have to point out to one single mechanism which is common amongst these firms, which is used for trust building, anyone can point out to any single mechanism. It's a very interesting mechanism, very simple one actually, which is used to in a way build trust. Any guesses? Are you familiar with rating systems? Right. So these rating systems are essentially used to make to in a way ensure trust exists between strangers, right? Because earlier business forms, there was a physical interaction. You will build a trust with one with whom you are transacting. Now a lot of time when you book an cab through Uber or Ola, you see the kind of ratings the driver is happening, how many ride he or she has taken, right? So trust these days is built digitally, right? It's a very interesting point to in a way ponder on when you talk about digital businesses. Having you're transacting with strangers digitally, and in a way reviews and rating mechanisms are a very important way of building trust. So much so, you might see businesses in future which essentially work on trust building, right? Their entire specialization would be being the storehouse of reputation capital of each one of us, right? So now that can be a business idea for some of you, right? Now I might as a user might have my ratings on Amazon. I might have my ratings as a host. I'm not a host, but I can be a rating as a guest on Airbnb. I might have a rating on Make My Trip. I might have a rating on Uber. So there are different. There are some platforms where as a customer you don't have a rating as such, but there are a lot of platforms where you as a customer can have a rating, right? Where such ratings are combined, right? So if you are somebody who's rated well on all platforms, a lot of people would like to do business with you, right? So this rating mechanism has been a very interesting mechanism of how trust building happens, right? Regulations catching up, right? One of the consistent themes of these platform based businesses is that they come in some regulation gray zone, and a lot of rules regarding them are not yet clear, right? So for example, they can be I can talk again, you people might be aware of such legal issues much more than what I am aware of, but some areas which I find fascinating in this domain are uh, what happens in Uber kind of a business model encourages people. If I have a car, I can subscribe to Uber's platform. I can provide my vehicle, right? I can use my vehicle for hailing. Anyone can be a driver on Uber. The initial model of Uber, it started with a phenomena called sharing economy. The idea was to, in a way, share your resource better, right? Ensure that your resource is better utilized. And this idea suggested that that there are latent there are resources which are lying vacant, not used, not getting used, and this resources can, if there is a facilitator like Uber and Ola, these resources can be better used, and you will then in a way, it will help in reducing consumerism because lesser number of vehicles would be required, right? So now what happens is, if I buy a vehicle, I have bought this vehicle paying an insurance, which is when I have when the insurer has assumed that I'll be using it for my personal usage. But now I'm using this vehicle commercially. Which kind of insurance would be applicable to me, right? Is Uber accountable for any mishappening which happens on an Uber cab, right? Sometimes Uber, they have incidents in Delhi, they have been incidents globally, outside places also, Uber has sometimes said that it is just a facilitator, right? It can't take responsibility of what is happening in a cab because the cab driver is not its employee, right? So that is again a regulatory gray zone, right? We see the kind of skirmishes platforms like Twitter has with government and Facebook have with government, right? So there are certain regulatory gray zones here because your regulation is trying to play a catch-up game a lot of times, right? Because these businesses have have in a way come and become big very fast, right? So if you look at US, if you are a taxi cab driver, there are a lot of tough examinations which you have to pass before you can earn your medallion, which is required for driving a cab. Now, if you're driving an Uber, you don't have to do all that. Right. So what happens in that kind of situation? So there is a lot of regulatory gray zone which is here. We see something which we call as rise of sharing economy. There are a lot of sharing based models which have come up. You don't own a product, you use it whenever you need it, right? That's the kind of sharing platforms which have come up, and this happened. This in a way coincided with the ending of global financial crisis of 2008-10. That is when these kind of sharing economy based models started coming in. Uh, right, I see it's 12:24. I think have I surpassed the time which was with me, Harsh? How is it?
Yes, sir, we do have, but if you want, we can continue for 5 minutes more. Have you wrapped up your presentation?
Cool. So I'll just wrap up my presentation in. Sorry, I didn't keep a track of time. I'll wrap up my presentation in 5 minutes, right?
Sure.
Okay, we have something called crowd-based capitalism coming in, right? So there is a decentralized model. These big firms, as we were talking about, Amazon and all, have a lot of users on both sides, and these decentralized users interact with each other. They are not big fleet owners, big businesses within them, right? So there is a rise of something called crowd-based capitalism. Another important theme is surveillance and is becoming very important. A lot of firms are in business of gathering your data, right? So there's very interesting thing which I generally talk in my information technology class. If you look at Facebook, do you think you are the product? You are the customer when we you in a way browse through Facebook. In actuality, we are not the customer of Facebook, right? These advertisers are essentially the customers of Facebook. We are the product which is getting sold, right? Our data, our identity is something which is being sold on these platforms, right? So a lot of modern day businesses have huge capabilities of tracking us or doing surveillance on us, so much so that there is rise of this new phenomena which is called surveillance based capitalism. So any earlier the power was derived from being big, having maybe warfare capabilities. Going forward in the digital era, power will be derived from who has more access to data, right? So that is some change which is happening, right? On that note, how many of you have seen this interesting documentary, Social Dilemma, on Netflix? Anyone?
For me, I can certainly say that I enjoyed watching documentaries on Netflix.
Okay, so there's this documentary on Netflix, Social Dilemma. These days, this documentary is in a way available for full documentary is available uh, on Netflix, on YouTube also, right? So Netflix has made it available for free on YouTube. I'll share this slide deck with you. Do give it a watch. It talks about how polarization and other things are happening in the digital age, right? So it talks about surveillance capitalism, which I was talking about here. It's a very interesting watch, right? So probably I'll this is where I'll try ending. Some of these changes we talked about. One of the change which is happening is the rise of platform economy. Some new kind of domains which are coming up based on and their applications are just listed down here. So we have AI and machine learning. The places where we see application of AI and machine learning is you have digital assistant. If you have any service request these days, you don't talk to a real person. You talk to a person which is an AI based machine. You have deployable AI versions of you are which are there. Natural language processing and understanding is happening to a great extent, used in different applications. Recognition technology is an interesting area. Voice prints, genetic recognition, email tracking are certain applications which is where this is getting used. Cyber security and privacy. There are a lot of privacy concerns. All these apps are tracking and automated hacking, cyber security, insurance, biometric malware is being used. So a lot of work happening in this area. Transportation and drone technologies. Drones are an upcoming product which has application in different industries for relief, help when a natural disaster strike, to food delivery, the flying taxis. So a lot of innovations are happening in this area. Robotics and 3D printing, they are in a way redefining the way manufacturing happens. You have molecular robots, self-assembling robots, 3D printing. Now organs are getting 3D printed. So that's another area where a lot of innovations are happening. Media, social networks, and augmented reality. Social media, Facebook, for example, is talking about moving to metaverse. It will use modern generation holograms. AR and VR is heavily used in gaming industry and other industries, right? Simple version, if any one of you has used Lenskart, they use a version of augmented reality to make you so same thing is happening in much more advanced being seen. Energy and environment in this area, a lot of new green techs, energy trading, artificial trees. There are some examples of innovations that are happening in energy space, biotech, healthcare, and wearables. Now there are better treatment, Internet of Things and smart cities. Because internet is becoming cheaper, now internet is getting integrated to a lot of physical devices. That is another interesting applications. In fintech, we see rise of blockchain. We see blockchain is the underlying technology behind cryptocurrencies, right? So blockchain finds a lot of interesting other applications apart from cryptocurrency also, right? One such recent application is NFTs, non-fungible tokens. These are tokens which get used for storage of digital, storing art and other valuable stuff digitally, right? So these are some technologies which might, in my opinion, might reshape the world, right? So last page, I actually have in a way pointed, I've just given you a link to one interesting report. I'll just show you this link as the last thing I do. Let me give, so this report, for those of you who are interested in understanding what all is happening in this space, should look at, let me simply paste it. Sorry, Harsh, for exceeding the time. Let me just show you this last bit. So this is a very interesting report. This is an annual report by Future Today Institute, and this report is available for free, right? Tech Trend report. You can download this report, and this gives you a summary. There is a summary which is a 20-minute read, and there is a full report. It gives you what all is happening in different tech frontiers, right? And what do we think are the things which will become a reality in future, right? So it's a beautiful report. It gives you a detailed summary of what is happening in the tech trend space, right? So I think, sorry, I took a little more than my allocated time. I think I got attuned to our 1 hour 30 minutes classes, and in a way, internally, subconsciously, I was working on that lines, right? Okay.
So thank you so much, sir. But although I had various questions to ask, but due to time constraints, I just have one question. So that is, today companies are recognizing the need for having digital talent criteria in recruiting new employees. So what is your advice to the students and young professionals who are listening to this webinar when they begin their university and professional lives?
All right. So one biggest advice, which something which I am also as a professional, I also see is valid for me also, is that the world is becoming more and more dynamic. Changes which happened probably earlier in 15-20 years will now happen in 1 or 2 years. So we have to keep updating ourselves, right? That's the biggest piece of advice I would like to give you, right? Something which is very happening in today would not remain important or relevant probably 4 years, 5 years down the line, right? So we have to keep rediscovering yourself. In my parents' generation, people used to take pride on the fact that they joined a company and they retired from that company working 35 to 40 years, right? You would not see that thing happening because in front of our eyes, entire industry may get wiped in. We had this pandemic, a lot of things are happening virtually now. The shape of education industry, for example, the industry which I belong to is changing, right? Every industry which you will see is changing, right? Earlier, a computer language which was important to learn would remain relevant for 15-20 years. C++, if people learned, they could like earn money for their entire career span. Now the language in itself, which is in vogue, changes every 2-3 years. So changes are happening at much faster pace. We need to rediscover ourselves, right? Keep learning about tech, whichever industry you are part of, right? So it's like, even if you're a law student, if you're a public policy student, learn about data, learn about coding, right? That is what I'll advise you.
So thank you so much, sir. And now we have audience questions, and some of the individuals who have joined this meeting, I know them personally, and many of them are from JSI. So of course, they are all waiting to ask you various questions on blockchain technology and why it is banned in various countries and how it is promoting terrorism. And one of my batchmates, I believe Ishan Kumar, he is into data science, and his team has created an app. So that app allows you to download movies. I hope I'm right. Otherwise, Ishan is there to help me out. So there are a lot of audience questions. So now I would open the floor for audience questions, and please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, please.
Hello.
Hi Vishram, yes.
Hi. So I have a question which is again related to the technology of cryptocurrency, right? Which is that in the original white paper that was put out by Satoshi Nakamoto, like the main use case was of cryptocurrency was to be like currency, right? However, as it has been
Yeah.
observed over the years since Bitcoin and other cryptos have launched, is that there have been many other applications, like for example Ethereum, smart contracts, decentralized apps, etc. Right? However,
Hmm.
like the major use case of cryptocurrency has been like as an investment tool, right? Like
Yeah.
the actual like usage of like cryptocurrency as like currency. For example, Tesla tried to do it, but then like I believe they like rescinded from accepting bitcoins. That was a thing, like
Yeah. Yeah.
that use case has not really come to be seen, right? Because of its
Yeah.
various natures. Like that is something I wanted to like have your thoughts on, like the idea that cryptocurrency are not really being used as currency. uh, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, so my understanding on that is, money is a very, money gives power, right? The power resides with whosoever has more money. So it's a very critical subject, right? The current system, monetary system, it took in a way centuries to evolve, right? It's a very foolproof systems. There can be critiques of the system, but it in a way allows a modern economies to run the way it is running, right? So people are still skeptic about digital currency providing the same stable form of monetary economics, right? How economies function in presence of money, right? So therefore, there will be huge reluctance going forward also in wide acceptance of of cryptocurrency, right? It has always been there, but there are always tech forward industry. Word is not an homogeneous entity. So there'll be tech stalwarts, people like Elon Musk, who will always do something tweet randomly about Dogecoin, make its prices go frenzy, a stock frenzy resulting in a stock frenzy. So those kind of things will happen. Those people who are in tech industry, who want to operate in the dark economy, which is not which where the governments don't have access to, these people will continue accessing and using cryptocurrency. It is gaining acceptance at places. The countries who started accepting it, but at the same time it will take significant amount of time for it to gain mainstream importance, right? And another interesting perspective which I have, this is my perspective and can be entirely wrong, it is a tussle between countries and companies also, right? So as I was telling you, with globalization 1.0, we had rise of nation state. Countries became the most powerful unit on earth, right? We've seen a shift. Now there are companies which are way powerful than a lot of nations, right? So Facebook, for example, has a valuation which has greater than most of the countries globally, right? I remember a figure from last year which says that only 17 countries globally have a GDP which is more than Facebook's valuation, right? So they're companies which are becoming big FANG companies, as they are called, some of these new tech giants. So what happens is acceptance of cryptocurrency will in a way lead to a shift of power from nation state to companies. And if I am sovereign country, I'll try protecting that, right? So you will see a lot of resistance for in a way acceptance of cryptocurrency from countries globally, right? On the other hand, the technology behind it, blockchain, the tamper-proof ledger facility which it provides, that has found application at a lot of places, right? So blockchain, even in supply chains, right? While you are in a way shipping vaccines and other stuff, right? So there's a lot of places where you can use blockchains. One recent application where I see blockchain getting used a lot is non-fungible tokens, NFTs, right? I hope I answered your question to some extent, Vishwa.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else has a question?
While we have audience question, one anecdote that has just struck me is the board of chess, as you mentioned. So there was the inventor of the chess presented his invention to the King of India, and the King of India sort of liked his invention. I hope you've heard that anecdote as well. And when the King of India liked this game, the board of chess, so he sort of was very happy with it, and he declared that whatever you want, I'll be ready to give it to you as a gift. So eventually, so the inventor of the chess asked the King of India to give him a single grain of rice, and that grain of rice to be placed on one square of the chessboard. And when you go to the second board of the chessboard, it should be 2 grains. The third board, it should be 4 grains, and it should eventually multiply as you keep the grains on the successive boards. So after a week or so, he turns up to the king again and says that, I haven't received my prize. You have promised me something. So the king gets very angry and he calls for the treasurer. And the treasurer says that, as soon as we reached the half board, so we figured out that, we don't have so many grains in our kingdom. And as you reach the last square of the chessboard, the amount is grown so exponentially that we can say that the whole world would have been covered with those grains of rice. So
Yeah,
eventually,
we two raised to the power 64, right? Yes.
yes. So eventually, the person had his head cut off and he was executed. But linking it to what we are having this webinar today, we are those grains of rice in the form of digitalization, and the inventor of digital technologies is no more with us. So this is the exponential growth that we have. And
Yes.
but due to such exponential growths, okay, so one of my colleagues, Ishan Kumar, wants to ask a question. Yes, Ishan, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for the session. I wanted to know, since in India, agriculture sector is still behind with the use of technology, they are still quite behind. So I wanted to know, do you have an idea or what's your opinion on this, or how technology can be used in agriculture sector, be it like boosting sales or boosting productivity? I just wanted to know your opinion on this.
Thank you. Interesting question, Ishan. I think there is a lot of scope of technology integration, and that is so. Indian agriculture has suffered for one big reason. When the agriculture got modernized, our land holdings have typically been slow, right? So, our land holdings have been low. So we could not adopt a lot of technologies like our Western counterparts could do. So while we had green revolution happening and other things, so there is a lot of scope of modernization, as you rightly mentioned, in case of agriculture. Now, what I feel is that technology can ensure that we have that living level playing field with other countries globally. How that can be done now is that a lot of these platforms which I was talking about, right, multi-sided platforms, they are ensuring that you can now have these different resources shared between people, right? So all these thrashers and other farm machinery now can be available on rent basis, right? And since you need a real time tracking, when there is a cultivation season, the cultivation season will be around in the entire region, right? But what happens in India, the cultivation season in a way progresses with monsoons, right? So in a way, you can use lesser number of resources and you can distribute them better by using these platforms, right? I know of a few companies like AgroStar and all, few startups have come in which are trying to in a way ensure better usage of these farm machinery. So that is one area. Another thing is that weather plays a very important role in case of agriculture, right? So proper dissemination of information, use of tracking technologies, use of these modern technologies, AI and all to understand soil configuration and changes in soil better, you can give more precise information and advice to farmers on what they should do. Another technology which I feel has good huge potential usage in agriculture is drone technology, right? So there are plans of using drones for forestation drives in places which are tough to access, right? So there are a lot of areas where tech can help us in having a level playing field in agriculture compared to developed countries.
Thank you, Ishan. And do we have any audience questions? Please do ask.
All right, I think people want to enjoy a good weekend, Harsh.
Yes, I definitely agree. And so thank you so much, everyone, for attending this session, especially on a weekend and making this happen. And a big thank you to all the board members of the Digital Future, Jasleen, Shruti, Ashutosh, and Parvati for making this happen. And a big thank you to Professor Joshi as well, who so willingly and kindly accepted our invitation. And sir, if you could please share your LinkedIn profile so that, I'm sure many people want to connect with you after this webinar as well. So if that's possible.
Sure. What I'll do is I'll do two things. I'll share this presentation deck. There were a lot of videos which I wanted to show, but I could not because of paucity of time. I'll share that and I'll share my profile as well with you folks, right?
Yes. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
it's really been a great session. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much with this week.
So, for taking out the time and giving us this lecture. It was really insightful, and for especially law students learning